Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me. Hello, hello. Welcome to class today. Welcome. Once again, thank you for joining me. Today what we're going to do is we're going to kind of take the last 2 weeks of our videos and combine them together. Right, so what I want to do today is I want to create just a proof of concept site that uses an API. So we'll be using Axios again today. Remember that when we are using Axios with our API, we can use it with our own JSON files as well. Right, what I would suggest would be, and we'll look at this toward the end when we go to push our site to GitHub this afternoon. I would suggest using GitHub as your JSON file host and then using Axios to pull the JSON from there. Would be a way to do it. So let's go ahead and let's get our project going. And so what I'd like to do today is I'd like to use an API, and I think this API in particular is a little interesting. It's a little different, and maybe you can see how we're going to be using it. Here it is. It's called Swappy, or the Star Wars API. And there are different parts of Swappy here, which is the Star Wars API, and we can look through the documentation to see all the different stuff that is available. But when I was looking through some of the publicly available APIs, so we don't have to worry about API keys, I saw this one and I noticed this. Right, that we are able to use an API location, which is swappy.dev/API/people/a number, and get some values returned to us. And I was like, we could actually use that with a parameterized URL and just be able to call all of the values that we want for all of our pages without a whole lot of work, right? Because we can see, okay, people/3 here is R2D2. 1 is Luke Skywalker. 40 is Watto. Right, so if we take that and we parameterize the number that goes after people here, we could actually use all of these different API links by just creating one parameterized URL with a parameterized component in it that will pull from these, that will use Axios to get information from these different API URLs as we go through. Seemed like a perfect thing to do for this proof of concept. We can also see that we have some API URLs embedded in the API, so that might be something interesting that you might want to do, or you might want to try if you're following along. Would be to see if you can figure out how to get the information from some of these sub API calls within this API call. You can do it with what we know. So let's head over to our YouTube or our Visual Studio here, and we'll get going here, and we will start by creating our project. So let me cd into the proper folder, which is going to be /web285. And then I'm going to want to npx create-react-app Star Wars, we'll call it. And that'll create our React app in a folder called Star Wars. And so our goal is going to be to create a parameterized route that will allow us to get to different pages, and we're not having to put different information on those different pages. We can create a singular component that just calls a different link based on the parameter and pulls different data from the API based on the parameter. So that's going to be our goal here. Interesting little proof of concept. If we wanted to take it a step further, and this might be one of the things that I do during our live classes during your work time, right? Because like the last 3 or 4 weeks of class is just to do your final projects in this course. And so what I'm going to do during those weeks is I'm just going to have just me coding and figuring things out, doing my own projects to maybe inspire or help you with certain issues. I was actually working on a React app earlier today. That would be a good one to extend out during one of those sessions. I was creating a React app using an API. I was actually using the YouTube API where I could take the share URL for a YouTube video and it would give me the APA citation. So I was pulling back all the information from the MP that I needed from the API. And then in the output, I was formatting it as an APA citation for that YouTube video. And it was a fun little React project to do. But, you know, we'll take those last few weeks when you're supposed to be working on your final exams, or your final projects, I should say, and I'll just be coding my own things during those weeks. To, you know, maybe inspire or help or whatever you need. All right, so it looks like we are in our folder here. Or I shouldn't say in our folder because we haven't CD'd into the folder yet, but we have gotten Create React App installed. So we should be able to CD into our Star Wars folder now. And I'm not going to npm start yet. I'm going to go ahead and install the 2 libraries that we're going to need. So let's npm I react router DOM. And we will npm I Axios. So we'll get our router and our Axios packages ready for us to go. Now we can open up our folder here in VS Code. So that'll be code .-r. Yes, trust. Open the terminal back up. And now we can run npm start. Oh, and actually, I still need to run that env file, don't I? To fix my ESLint problem. Yeah, so let's forgot about that. Let's Control C to stop our server. I will create my .env file and add my disable ESLint in there. Now I should be able to npm start with no issue. And there we go. That's better. There's our React app. Baseline site that we've seen 100 times at this point. Let's go through and clean it up a little bit. Or let's clean up our project a little bit like we normally do. I might do a little CSS on this one, so I think I'm going to keep the CSS file. So we'll keep the references to the CSS file in that. I'll just remove the CSS out of it. And actually, I think I'm going to keep that .app text align center there. We'll just remove everything else. I do want to remove the readme.md there, so that's not in our project when we move it to GitHub, just because that's the standard readme boilerplate, doesn't need to be there. And in app.js, I will remove all the boilerplate between the div class name equals app tags there. Save everything up. Remove our reference to our logo. Remove our logos from our public directory, just so we can save ourselves some effort there, or file size, I should say. And we can start work. We'll remove our logo from there too. We don't need it. Don't need it, not using it. It's all good. So in our app.js file, what we're returning here, the only thing that we're really going to need in here to import, we're going to import router into here, and we're going to import Axios into our other file. So I actually think I want to let this sit for a little while. Right? I don't think I want to mess with the app.js file quite yet. All right, so while I'm in my source folder here, I'm going to make myself a new file. And I'm going to call it stwars, S-T-W-A-R-S .js. And that'll be the name of my file. And so in here, I'm going to want to be able to use parameters from my parameterized route, right? So if you remember back to a few weeks ago when we did that, I need to import use params from React router DOM. I'm going to need to import Axios from Axios. And as per usual, I'm going to need to work with some states in here. So I am going to import use state from React. And so those are my imports that I'm going to want to use here. And so we'll start out kind of like what we did last week and just do a little bit of a proof of concept so we can see the things come into our like our console before we start to mess with the data. Right, so let's create our function in here that we're going to export out. So this will be export default function, and it's going to be capital S-T-W-A-R-S. It's going to be our stores function. And for right now, we will be returning nothing. We'll just have an empty return statement there ready for us to use. We'll put a hello world here. Why not? We'll put an H1 hello world while we're getting started. So now if we did everything right, I should be able to come over here, import my stores file. So I should be able to import stores from /stores stores.js. I haven't saved that file yet, so I should probably go over here and save this one. And if we go ahead and we just add a reference to our stores component here, just to make sure that we have everything hooked up properly. If we check our site, we should see we have a hello world there. So that's good. Won't be there for long, because we're going to run that through our parameterized route in just a bit. But this just gives us the indication that we've done everything right in terms of importing one file into another file. Everything is hooked together. So now we can proceed with the next step. So let's head back over to that stores file. Up here at the top of my export function, let's start out by just getting the data from our API, right? So we'll just do a static API call to start us out with, and then we'll convert it to use the parameter, right? I want to see it work before I make it a little bit fancier. And that's something that I suggest to all of you, right? Like, as you are, that's one of the important things to kind of learn out of this class, is that, as I'm trying to figure something out, I can start with things that I know, and then I can build on them. Right? And so what I might want to do here is use Axios to get the data. So let's create a constant in here. We'll call this char data for character data, and we'll set that equal to an axios.get call to https://swappy.dev/api/people/ let's go with 10. Right, so we should be able to look at our Swappy API here. Right, this is our URL here that we're using. It's got the data. It returns this JSON. Right, and so if we look at person 10 here, we can figure out who that is. That is Obi-Wan Kenobi. So now that we've seen that here, we'll know that it's pulling the right data over into our application. All right, so let's give that a try. So we're getting our data, putting it into this constant. But that gives us, right, if you remember back to when we were talking about it, it gives us a weird object that we need to kind of deal, it gives us a weird promise object that we have to work with, right? Because this is an asynchronous function. So it gives us a weird promise object that we need to kind of parse out. So we need to write another function to kind of parse the response as the result of this promise. Right? Because, one of the things that we were talking about in the video last time was that, we're making a promise and this promise either gets fulfilled or it doesn't get fulfilled. And so we need to write a little bit of code that fulfills the promise, gets our data, puts it into something that we can use. So what I'd like to see here first is just to get everything kind of pushed out to the console that we could potentially use. Right? So that's going to be our char data promise that we're dealing with. Then, so once we fulfill the promise, then we will take and get a response. Add our little arrow here. And we will console.log response.data. Right, so remember that the response is the object, the JSON object, the big overall object that we get when we get our promise fulfilled, and the data is the actual elements that are inside of the JSON. Right, so we can save this. Should reload our site, right? We shouldn't have any visual differences here. But if we look at our console by inspecting and console, we see we have a little object here. Have a little object here in our console, and it's telling us all sorts of information. Birth year, created, edited, eye color, films. Films are an array. So if we wanted to work with that, we would need to use like a loop or something to output all of the films. Gender, hair color, eye color, or height, homeworld. Eye color is on here, but I'd already said it. Mass, name. Right, so the thing that we'll want to do first here is just get name. Right, one of the things that we were talking about previously is how we could use just dot notation from here. Right, so if we wanted to pull the name, we could just do dot name and save. And so now if we go here, we can just see that we're pulling back the name Obi-Wan Kenobi in our console now. And so instead of just outputting this to the console, what we might want to do is change a state with that name in it. So let's go back up here, right under our char data here, and let's create a constant for a state. We'll call this name. So our variable will be name, and our setter will be set name, and that will equal a, let's see, it's a use state or a set state. And that, yeah, that'll equal a set state of character name. Right, or we can leave that empty. It'd probably be a better idea to leave it empty. Now, if we are going to, we are using state here. That state, it's use state. We are using state here. So if we were to change hello world here to curly braces name, curly braces, then we should see the default state which we've set here, which is character name. So pull in Obi-Wan Kenobi here. So when we pull this, we should be able to, within this response, set name to response data name. And now once this happens, I'm trying to see if I can kind of put it in a good place where we can see everything, but I'm going to save. And now it says Obi-Wan Kenobi. Right, so we've got the name that we're pulling in from the data, from the API now. So we're using the API to pull the name. We can comment out this console log here if we want. We can revisit that if we need to. Or we can just use the API documentation if we wanted to do anything else. Right, because if we look at the API here, it tells us all of the things that are contained in this JSON file. So there's all sorts of stuff that could be done here in terms of that. But that gets us the basics of being able to pull the data from our API, right? Which is pretty useful. So now what we want to do is, we said we wanted to take advantage of it to where this becomes a parameter. So whenever we enter a URL, then we get a different character based on the number that we enter. Right? It will change based on the parameter. It'll call a different JSON file from the API, give you different data, pull a different character, and you've basically just made an entire site database from an API. Right, so in order to do that, the first thing that we'll need here is we'll need a place for it to go. So we'll need to establish our routes here. So it is time to switch back over to our app.js file. And I'm going to want to make sure that I have imported everything that I need from React Router. I'm going to import browser router as, let's say, R. Let's import routes. Let's import route. And let's go ahead and import link. Why not? From React Router DOM. And I need to close this curly brace here. Curly brace gets closed there. So now that we have that, we can create our routes. We can create links if we want to. We might create a few links. You know, just to have a little bit of fun here. But we will take and we will wrap everything that we've done so far here in our R tag, because that's our browser router. So everything that we've done so far gets wrapped in our browser router. We have that browser router aliased as R. So we can just wrap that around everything that we've done, and we can create our links if we need them, and or whatever else, right? I'm going to remove that because that's not going to be an issue anymore. And we're just going to start out by just adding some routes here that'll be parameterized to get us to where we want to get to. So I'm going to go down below my div here. And let's add some routes. So we'll add our routes tags here. And this will give us the option to add our routes. If we wanted to create a home link, which we might, that would be route path equals here, and element equals app. And actually, I want curly braces, not quotes there. And so that's our home route. So we know that if we delete that, it'll take us back home. And if we want to use the parameter, we can route path equals /: CID for character ID, or C_ID, whatever we want to say here. And the element in this case will be our stores. So that'll be stwars dot, or not dot anything, slash greater than, and we'll close that route. So now we have two routes here. Actually, that's a problem. I don't want to use app here. So let's just create a different function here. Const welcome equals, just so we can have something to point this to. Because I can't actually point it to, I can't recursively point it to itself, so we need to just create something that we can point it to here quickly. H1 Star Wars characters, and now instead of app we can refer to welcome. And there we end up with Star Wars characters. And we've got our paths here. Now, as it stands, our stores.js file is going to a specific URL in the API, but it doesn't have to, right? We just need to use our parameter. So let's create a constant here. Const const. We will call it CID, or let's call it param. Let's call it P for parameter. Why not? We'll just call it P, and this will be use params. So now we can take the parameter in, any parameters that get passed to the URL here will be brought in and put into P here. So now I can take our URL that's in Axios here and concatenate that with P dot C underscore ID, because that's our parameter that we're pulling in. So now on my site, if I go to say /10, I get character name. Briefly, before it changes to Obi-Wan Kenobi, after it loads the data, right? Which would be something that we would want, maybe we'd want to change that just so it doesn't show anything before it loads the data. So let's do that. If I go to 40, it'll pull from ID 40. If I go to 45, it'll pull from ID 45. I'm not sure how many are in here. Let's try 100. Looks like maybe a fetch error there. Maybe not. Maybe there isn't 100. Let's run a little inspect here. Check the console. Yep. Got an Axios. Yeah, got a fetch error here in the Axios. So there's not 100. Let's see. Let's try. So we got 50. We got 100. So if we use programmer logic, we split it in half when we say 75. And there is a 75 here. It's R4P17. So we'd split the remainder in half and we'd try like 88. So there's not an 88. We'd go back down and we'd say 80. Tarful's 80. 85. Not an 85. 82. Looks like there is an 82. Yes. 83. 84. So no. So there are 83 JSON files in this API, and we can get to all of them by just going to a different parameter in our URL, which is pretty cool. And so what could be kind of fun is to just get a random character. Now that we know that, and I am kind of going off script a little bit here, so we'll see how this goes. Just to maybe click a button or something and get a random character that gets passed as the parameter. Or just get a random character in general and just have that be where you forward it or what you do, right? So that might be interesting. So let's try that out in our app.js file here. Let's create a variable here in our function.app. Let's create a random number. So let's let r equal math.floor math.random times 83. And so now we can create a link in our project that can just take us to a random Star Wars character. So a Star Wars character randomizer of sorts. So this will go 2 equals slash plus r, and I might have to that. Let me try. Try this. Might work. Or maybe just this. Maybe just R here. This is something, again, I'm kind of going off the reservation a little bit with this. So let's just try this. Let's try R. Random character. Okay. Let's put our welcome call here above that. And since this is a character randomizer, let's call it a Star Wars character randomizer. Now. And let's just do... Let's do this. Thing out. So now I'm sure we'll have to fix this. So I'm sure this is probably not right. So let's take a look. And let's see what we're getting. So we got a random character link here, but it's not appending anything. So that doesn't seem like it's working the way we might have wanted it to. Let's try to look it up. Okay, let's try. This one site suggests string templating, which is a thing that we've done before in JavaScript. So we can use ticks and say slash $R and close the tick. Why isn't it recognizing my tick here? My template. Okay. You do. This is interesting. Doesn't seem to like that. See if we can find some other information here. Right? And this is what it's about sometimes. It's just trying to figure it out. Oh, okay. It wants me to wrap this in curly braces. Something that wasn't mentioned in the other item there. So that should work potentially. Oh, and it looks like it does. If we refresh our page here, we get a random, when we hover over the link, we see it's /64. We click that, and it gives us a different name. We do have to refresh the name to get another link, and we were given a 0 there. We want to potentially deal with that, right? So it's not 0. So let's go into our randomizer here and say times 82 instead of 83. And then add 1 to the whole thing. And then if we wanted to, we could probably add an event handler here that would rerun this and let it, or do a set state, get state. So let's add an on click here and set that equal to a function. So let's do a let or a const r get r equals use state. That there. We do need to import state, so let's just copy and paste that over from our stores here where we were using it. That's going into app.js. And we'll put that there. And then we should be able to work with an on-click event handler here. That will run get r. So let's create a const, call it handle click. Get r. And just run our random number generator again. And then on click, we can handle click. Might not be exactly the way we want to handle that, but let's try it out. It didn't error out on us. So let's give that a shot. So we see, but we'll refresh our page here. We see by default, gives us one. We click it. And it gives us another one. That worked. That did exactly what we wanted it to do. We have a Star Wars character randomizer. That's so cool. And every time we click, we get a different character out of the Star Wars API, the Swappy. Pretty cool stuff. Right, and if we wanted to, we could add more details in our stores file, right? We don't just have to get the name. We can get some of the other things that the API has in store for us. So if we wanted to from here, right, we could go into our CSS file, or let's use app.css here. And let's just do like a body background color. Let's go for like a dark gray. So let's go for like hashtag 252525. All right, so now we have a dark gray site here. Let's change. Let's get a dot title text here, and we'll make it like a bright orange, a yellow orange. Right, so we'll go color hashtag bright yellow orange. So that's going to be a little more than half green than red. So we'll go hashtag FF. Let's go like CC 00. That's what we want. So now we can go into our app.js, look for our welcome here. We can give it class name equals title text. All right, we should also be able to do that in our stores file here. H1, let's make this an H2 just for accessibility purposes, since we already have an H1 on the page, or really another H1 would be fine. But we'll make it an H2. Class name equals title text. We'd want to change that link color there, so, and we might want to make it bigger. Or maybe put it on a background might be good. So let's go into our app.css here. Let's kind of take that link and maybe make it more button-ish. So we'll create a random button. We'll say font size 2M, padding. Let's say 1.3M, background color. What should it be? Maybe just white. Color. We'll just say something like, we'll just use our dark gray here. So hashtag 252525. And then we can put that on our link handler here. So class name equals, what did we call it? Random button. Random button. Little too big. That's okay. I want to make that padding a little smaller. I might want to add a little margin to it. All right, so let's go back to our app.css. Let's make that padding more like 0.4M. And let's add a little margin top, 1.2M, something like that. All right, so now we can click the button, get a random character from Star Wars. Pretty cool. Good proof of concept here. You see it kind of freaking out a little bit when I get to going a little bit too fast for it, and that's the virtual DOM trying to catch up there. So we want to take our time with it. But every time I click, it calls a different URL and loads a different character from the API. which is pretty fun. And so that's basically it. That's what I have to show. So we're basically done for today. So we can get ready to upload this to GitHub. We'll call this React_Star Wars. And we'll create the repository. I'm going to go ahead and copy React_Star Wars right here because I know I'm going to need it later. Let's go ahead and stop our live server. So Control C. Control C. There we go. So now I can start running my git commands, git init, git add period, git commit -m, and this is our initial commit. Now we can start running our other commands that are given to us by GitHub. So I'm going to add my origin. We're going to git push origin master. I'm going to copy that React_Star_Wars.get again before I refresh, because when I refresh, my code will be there. So now I can start to do the GitHub Pages stuff. Right, so let's do that. Let me make sure I have my notes here to do that, because those are helpful. There they are. So we're gonna install the GitHub Pages repo or framework, so it has it. So that's going to be npm I, and remember to be careful with this, right? gh-pages --save-dev. When you do that --save-dev, I don't think I've mentioned it before, but that puts it in a special development folder in your project directory, so it doesn't interfere with anything else that's in your project. So we have that now. So we can add the items to our package.json. Under the version here, we'll add the homepage. Homepage DeRamsey.github.io/repo name. Then we'll add our pre-deploy and deploy scripts. So this will be pre-deploy. And our pre-deploy script is npm run build. And then our deployment script is gh-pages-d build. We'll make sure we have that saved. And then we should be able to run npm run deploy. It'll go through the pre-deploy scripts, then it'll start running the deploy scripts. And it'll optimize the whole thing to be able to work on a standard GitHub Pages site. We'll see how well it does, I guess, and it should be published. So now if we go back to our GitHub here, we'll give it a little refresh. We should see we have 2 branches now, which is what we're looking for. And so here in just a moment on the Pages page, we should have a URL generated for us so we can look at our project here. So while we're waiting on that, we'll take any questions anybody who's live has with me today. We made a pretty cool little proof of concept randomizer that uses several different things that we have worked on this semester. So I think that's pretty cool, right? You know, it kind of takes multiple different pieces that we've dealt with and puts it into a singular site. Yeah, module 7 is still in the process of being built. I should have it ready. Module 6 is ready, which is the next module. So before we're done with module 6, module 7 will be ready. I have it. I just have it in another file. It'll be a little bit different. Yeah, before we're done with module 6, we'll have module 7. Yep, sure thing. There's my URL. Looks like it's ready to go. I can start pulling my random characters. Pretty cool. So with that being said, unless there are any more questions, that's all that I have for you for today. So we'll go ahead and wrap things up here. If you come up with any questions later on, please feel free to send me a Teams message or an email, and we'll do the best we can to answer your questions. That's all that I have for you for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.